What are the keys to financial freedom in a post lockdown world? What if everything we were ever told about finance was not only wrong, but it's keeping us poor? And in today's video, my guest is Gary Collins, and he wrote a manifesto on this exact subject. He's best known for being a off the grid individual that really started to popularize this movement, written books about it, and built amazing off the grid properties. But he also wrote a fantastic book in his series. This one is called The Guide to Financial Freedom. Free yourself from the chains of debt and find financial peace. So we're going to be breaking down how to achieve financial freedom in a post-lockdown world, but I probably shouldn't say post entirely because these individuals got their fingers on the trigger, huh? So make sure you hit the like button, give us a comment down below, say Gary rules, help us out with the YouTube algo. Shout out to our sponsor, Vizsla Silver, one of our favorite silver and gold mining stocks. We're going to link the website where you can get Gary's book as well. And good to see you, Gary.
Good to see you too, Jake. It's been a while.
Yeah, no, it's good to connect again. So let's talk about it. First question, let's bring it back to today's world. So if we call it a post-lockdown world, let's start with what are the keys here? And what makes you want to discuss this subject? I know we've talked about your story before, but it blends in nice.
Well, yeah, with going off the grid in that book, there was a preamble to it. And what I did, I talk about my backstory and how I did everything and leaving the government and becoming debt free, that I realized that there was a lot more to the financial picture that I needed to expand upon and talk more and kind of what I've done throughout my life. You know, I grew up from very poor means. I was always pretty savvy with money because I had to, because I didn't have any. So when you don't have any, it's it's easy to manage. But when you start to get more money later on in life, become successful, those principles still apply. And the biggest one I always talk about for people is the biggest chunk of freedom you can come to on the financial side is being debt free. It opens up a whole different kind of avenue of how you live your life, because it takes so much less money to live than it does if you're burdened by the typical American debt. And I coined a famous, but a phrase in the book that I talk about. You have to look at money as freedom. The more money you have, the more potential for freedom you have. The more freedom you have, the less money it takes to maintain that freedom. And I live by that, and it seems like it goes in a bit of a circle, but it's totally true. I've been debt free for the most part. I leverage money here and there, but I'm a little more advanced. I've been doing this a long time. I can leverage money when it's cheap. I don't recommend that for new people. But doing that, it's allowed me to do a lot of things that I couldn't do when I was burdened with more debt. And that's the key. You have to get to being debt free. That is the key. That should be the goal.
I'm kind of butchering the data, but I know it's something incredible. 80% or so of people live paycheck to paycheck, and pretty much, I think it's probably around the same 8 out of 10 people, you might know better than me, are in some form of debt. Now, I've never been in debt. I actually didn't even have a credit card until 2 years ago. I got one to start. I was like, I might as well get some like miles bonus. And so for someone that's in it though, I feel like I can't totally advise on that. I would say, look, you got to start making more money. You got to be more disciplined, but you're an expert on that. So tell me, what are some important steps before we move forward in the rest of our discussion for someone that's in debt right now? They've even kind of just let it keep going because they don't feel like they have a way out of it. What do we do?
And that's interesting you say that, because I flip it around a little bit. I always tell people we're in the most prosperous country in the world. We are the richest people in the world. If you make minimum wage, which is technically $15 an hour, but good luck hiring anyone today for $15 an hour. People want $25 an hour just to show up and, be on their phone and maybe sweep the floor occasionally. But $15 an hour is $31,400 a year. That puts you in the top 1% of richest people in the world. Our minimum
$31,000 does?
Yes.
What?
Yeah. That puts you in the richest 1% in the world. So America,
Man,
what
we
we
are such a poor human species. Just the 1% just controls everything, and everyone else is just like basically a plebe.
well,
That's
and that's what I mean. People in this country look at things ass backwards, and I always talk about that. We make plenty of money in this country.
hmm.
We earn plenty. That's not the issue. Our problem is just like our glorious governments, our federal government and state and local governments, we spend like drunken sailors all the way around. So I tell people, you make enough money. Every American has the potential to be a millionaire. That is insane. I broke down the numbers. You saw it in the book. It's all done with basic math. It's the only financial book I know of that does everything with basic math and proves my point all the way through. That you need to start reducing your debt load, because when you reduce your debt load, instead of trying to focus on making more money, because making more money means you have to commit more time. Life's about time. How much time you're wasting on other things that you don't want to do. So the more you have to go out and try and earn more money in the beginning. Hey, I'm a big fan of earning as much money as you can, but I'm also a person who believes that you don't need that much money to live the life you want if you manage it properly. And so that way you can funnel more time into the things you want to do, but you reduce your debt. I always say credit cards are ground zero. They're the highest interest rate. It's the revolving debt that everyone gets, even as a teenager today. So start there. Start with your credit cards. Start with the smallest balance. I'm a Dave Ramsey fan. Started listening to him way back when he had a small radio show on AM radio back in the day. But he's always talked about this, that you start with the credit card with the smallest balance. Even though you may have one that has very high interest, the reason you do it is to get the psychological effect. Once you pay it off, it gives you this boost of, I can do this. I can actually get this done now. Then from there, move on to the one, if you can manage it, the one with the highest interest. Also try and get 0% interest transfer balance between cards if you can. A lot of companies will allow you to do that. I've done it multiple times. I've leveraged 0% interest for 12 months to build my off-grid house because there's no financing, which is changing though. That's a topic for another time. So yeah, I always say start with your credit cards. Get those paid off because those are the highest interest rates by far, comparably to everything, all the revolving credit you have, that's going to be the highest interest rate.
Okay, so let's move on to identifying the problem. And one of the main problems that you pointed out that I've also heard you kind of as one of your themes so far as we've been talking today is about changing the way that you look at money. So I want to dive into that a little bit more, but first I want to say that I caught a couple things you were saying there is that you shifted your definition, so therefore your perception about money to be money equals freedom.
Yep, absolutely.
And I assume that that has a drastic shift. I know that it did for me. So let's talk a little bit about that. Change the way you look at money. I think a lot of people have been rocked over the last 18 months or so. And everything's also getting a lot more expensive. So maybe people that were able to hold on, maybe now they're watching some of their purchasing power starting to decrease. People are worried about freedom. So I think there's a sense of urgency financially. So what are some of the important ways we can begin to change the way that we do look at money? And what do you feel like the biggest habitual dangers we unconsciously hold about money are? What are some of those?
Well, and it all wraps into one, right? In America, we have, 70% of our economy is consumer based, right around there. What that means is our model, which is a very flawed financial model. I believe in laissez-faire capitalism. The government should stay out of entrepreneurship and private business and stay out. But we're in an oligarchy. Big business and big government are so intertwined today that what we have is a consumer model, which means that us, the ants, we need to keep consuming and buying and spending all the time for this economy to make the richest richer is the easiest way to put it. Amazing that COVID, the richest people in the country absolutely increased their wealth dramatically. And that proves the model of consumerism. So what we do is we go out and we spend, instead of spending time finding happiness, working on our health is atrocious in this country. It's absolutely mind-boggling bad. Exercising, doing the things we want, spending time with family. What we do is we shop. That's what we do. That's what we've been taught. We buy a ton of stuff that we don't need. When you look at it that way and go, okay, instead of being the ultimate consumer, I need to be the ultimate freedom finder. Well, use that money to find your freedom instead of buying things that you don't need. I mean, we have things in our houses and our garages. Most car garages in the country, people can't get cars in because it's just jam packed with crap.
Well, a lot of
So,
people's cars more expensive than the amount of money they make in 1 year
oh
because
yeah,
they
oh
the car. And that's an interesting one to think about, isn't it?
yeah. And right now, what people are doing, which shocks me, this is proves my point again. I've seen more expensive trucks and cars today, mainly trucks. Trucks are outrageous. I can sell my 1-ton diesel for more than I paid for it 5 years ago today.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how expensive the used car market is. You should not be buying a car right now. Unless you absolutely need it, do not buy a car. It is the worst time to buy a car is right now. And so, people do that. So I'm seeing these big 50, 60, $80,000 vehicles. And I'm seeing people pile out of them and I'm going, I'm pretty sure that was not a wise purchase. And I'm not I'm not judging. I'm just looking, I'm going, that stimulus money, you do realize that's going to run out and you're going to have to get back to work at some point and you're going to be paying $1,000 a month for a car, which is outlandish to me. So yeah, it's look at the things you can afford. So if you don't need a car right now, don't buy a car, and if you need a car, buy a cheap one that gets you point A to point B, gets good gas mileage. I don't know, just a thought. And, even me, I own cars that are not that expensive. And my truck, I got a crazy deal. It's $20,000 almost below MSRP. I don't know how I did it. It was dumb luck. I caught it just right. I didn't even want to buy the thing, but it was cheaper than the alternative of what I was looking at used or right around the same price. But yeah, look at things you buy and always say the first question you need to ask yourself is, do you need it? Is it something you need or is it something you want? If it's something you want, you probably don't need it. So don't buy it. Second question, can you afford it to pay cash? And if you can't pay cash, guess what? Can you live without it? And if you use that cycle for every purchase, it changes that consumer kind of mindset that you've been integrated with and is kind of taught to us from birth. You'll go, okay. I always have this famous saying, one of the famous decluttering books, does it give you joy? What the hell does that have to do with living an actual financial free life? Nothing. It's not about giving you joy. Do you need it? My drill does not give me joy. My drill drills holes. That's what it does. That's what I need it for. I don't want to coddle it and think it and go into my house and think everything. That's woo-woo crap. You need to go, do I need it? Will this serve a purpose in my life? That's what you need to do. And I'm not saying, go to the opposite end of, don't buy anything ever and sit in your living room in a lawn chair. I'm not saying that either. What I'm saying is use well-informed and smart purchases for the things you need. Right now you should not be buying big ticket items because they're outrageously expensive. I mean, you're paying at the top of the market. Wait till this stuff crashes. It will. I've lived through, this is the third one I've lived through now, and I've heard it every single time. This one's different. The real estate market is famous for this. They always say, oh, this one's different. You need to get in now. And it's like, that's when you should not get in. And I'm building a house right now. So some people go, oh, you're a total hypocrite. I'm building a guest house, a very small house. And I'm doing it as a studio for my business. So it's also a write-off. And I bought we tried to get all the materials prior to all this going nuts. So worst case scenario is that house will break even. Worst case, it should still be worth more than I put into it for sure. But even that, if I wouldn't have started when I did it, I wouldn't start it right now. Absolutely not what I started right now. I started
So
it 6 months ago.
what one of the problems you identified changed the way that you look at money. And you said to become a freedom finder. And I thought that was interesting, right? Because once that perception shift happens, it actually seems like it becomes easy to achieve the goals you want because your perception shifts. But one of the issues that you said many people run into in your book is no math equals no money. Can you explain that?
Yeah. This is, and I've done consulting for years. And it started off, I had a health company once I got out of the government and started doing that. And what I noticed was most people, because we talk about budgets, that was the first two big things people always say with health. I don't have the time. I don't have the money, which both are complete utter BS. They're just excuses. Because being healthy is far cheaper than being the typical American glutton today. It's far cheaper. That, I noticed they just didn't have basic math skills. And we would sit down and try and do their budget, and they couldn't apply math to their budget. And I'm all, if you can't do basic math and figure out where you're spending your money, you are doomed. And I use this example of drug dealers. I used to did all kinds of investigations. One thing I noticed about the good ones is they run it as a business. If you don't think this guy who's running a pretty successful drug dealing business and trafficking business doesn't understand basic math, you're wrong. That dude understands math better than the average American by far because they understand input, output. They get it. And if you can't put that in life, and I would sit down with people, I had people actually start to cry because part of the stuff I do today too is break out all their bills. I go, we got to break out all your bills. We need to know where your money's going. We have to know. And they sit there, and I literally have seen tears as they put it all in front of them, and it starts to fill the table. And I go, we need to add all this up and figure out what you're spending per month and what you bring in a month. It's funny to know that they kind of have an idea of how much they make a month. Not always, but they have no clue what they're spending. None. Zero.
That's an amazing one because
Yeah.
that's the issue that I know I had. And I agree. It feels like most people that I would talk to, for the most part, people don't even know exactly what they make because after the taxes and it's deposited in, they don't really know.
Yeah.
So you're saying you have to know where your money goes.
And where the tears would really start is they became embarrassed.
Yes.
Once we went through and we started, I go, you do realize you spend $1,500 a month eating out. And that was on the low end. I had a family that was spending $3,000 a month eating out. And they were overweight, they were unhealthy, and they were struggling financially. And I go, it's right here. This is one big part of it right here. Cook your own food. I'm all, golly, $3,000 a month. And I think today that is not unusual because it's over 70% of Americans primarily eat their meals out today.
Oh,
We're
wow,
so
that's
lazy, we won't even prepare our own food. And not only that, but you have to realize that, and I'm not against eating out by any stretch, but eating out when I was growing up as a kid poor was a big event. I mean, that was a special event, eating out. We did it maybe a couple times a month. People are doing it every single day. I mean, they're eating every meal out to include getting their coffee. If you can't make coffee, I don't know. I can't help you. Coffee's about basic as it gets, and most people spend $5 for a cup of coffee that would cost them 15 cents at home. And that's, you have to start looking and analyzing these places where you're blowing this money and start taking it back and start being, I teach self-reliance, figuring out how to do things for yourself. And that's a big part of it as well.
I really like that. And here's the second half to that. So I felt like that. I remember going through that and I felt legitimately embarrassed whenever I finally decided, I forget what year it was, but I finally decided I didn't want to be broke anymore. And I stopped, chalking it up to whatever excuse. I was so embarrassed. And then I became, very disciplined, everything from coffees, cooking at home, doing all those things. And then I got to a point where I felt like I was so focused on constriction And then my problem was I spent no time ever thinking about how to make more money. And I think part of that is kind of we're conditioned in our world. But I think a lot of the personal finance gurus um, don't ever talk about it in their, in their books. Like Dave Ramsey's book, maybe it's the Seven Baby Step book, whatever it's called. I read through that book to find how much he talked about income earning, and I found like one or two sentences. And I know it's really important because most people's primary problem is really debt. And so that the message that Dave and many people talk about is so important. But what allowed me to become a millionaire in my 20s was I got control of my discipline. I refocused my definition of money to be, as you said, becoming a freedom finder. I started building self reliance. And now I do spend a lot of money, but I also make a lot of money and I save an incredible percentage of it. But it happened when I realized there was another component, which was about income earning and in business. And
Yeah.
so I'd love for you to talk about that because I know that that's something that's been very powerful for you as well.
Yeah, and I run my own business, and I know you talk about it as well. I mean, that final kind of step of freedom is running your own show, running your own business, being your own boss. But the problem today is we lack such little discipline. I always say, if you can't function at the job you're at, you're going to fail as an entrepreneur 100%. It's 100% failure rate. You will not make it.
Why?
Because what people do is, I always say, you take those bad habits that you have at your job and you bring them to your own business.
Wow.
And the example I give of this is what I used to do is I look at when I was working for other people, the government excluded, but I've been in the private sector as well, that I was getting paid to be trained to be my own boss. That's how I looked at it. I went, they're
Interesting.
paying me to learn how to be better at figuring this stuff out and being more disciplined to run my own business. If you look at it that way, don't get me wrong, the work environment sucks. Hey, working for other people sucks. It does. That's why you want to run your own business is, but people always think that it's going to be easy. And I tell them, you're going to work harder than you ever worked before until you get it nailed down. Then the free time starts happening. Then you can start outsourcing things. But those first 2 to 3 years are going to be the 2, 3 hardest years of your life, trying to get this thing off the ground and figure out what the heck you're doing. And so, yeah, I always tell people, look at it, go to your job as if you own the company. Go with that attitude every day. Utilize the skills and figure out the skills you're going to need to develop your own business. And if you take that mindset and you do that, first of all, you're going to be a great employee. And the odds of you getting a raise, and even when you say, hey, boss, I'm going to start my own business, I'm leaving, there's a chance they may throw so much money at you. You may go, you know what? I'm going to hold off for a little bit, but that doesn't mean you stop the pursuit. The best time to start your own business is when you have a job.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, because most people I've met, entrepreneurs, this is what they do. They get pissed off at work one day. They yell at their boss, they storm off, and then they got to figure out how to start their own business. Don't do that. It puts so much pressure on you. And what it also does, as a former white collar investigator, I used to watch this all the time, is once you cross that line and now you're panicking, you start to do unscrupulous, immoral things to make money. I've seen it time and time again. Once you cross that line, you can't take it back because now you crossed it. And I've always said that I may not make the most money, but I'm well known. What you see is what you get. There's no gloss. There's no smoke and mirrors. My business is my business. I tell it straight up. I only teach the things that I do myself. I don't tell you to do things that I do not do, that I learned on theory. That's BS. And with that, though, I sleep well at night. I sleep like a baby because my business is helping people and it's morally focused to do the right thing.
So
So that's an important part too. If you're selling widgets right now and you hate selling widgets and your business model is to sell those widgets on your own, you're going to be miserable. Now you're just going to be miserable as your own boss.
absolutely. So you said a couple interesting things there that I liked. You said that the bad habits you have will follow you. It reminded me of, I forget who said it. Everyone's heard it. Might be Ralph Waldo Emerson. Wherever you go, there you are. And you said that the bad habits you acquire at your job will follow you to your business. And I thought that was pretty interesting there, huh? So
Yeah.
it's being able to self-reflect and be legitimately honest with ourselves and find out what our worst habits are that are holding us back. And I feel like in a lot of instances we know what they are, but we get so used to it we don't do anything about it, right?
Well, that's why I wrote a book about 14 habits, the habits to change. See, I put all this together in pieces so people, I'm not trying just to hawk books, but I am an author. That's how I make a living. And I do own all my books. That there's no big publishing company behind them, telling me how great I am or that you must buy this. I did all this on my own. I had to figure it out. I didn't go to school to be a writer. I am literally almost, I would say English is my worst category of learning and schooling growing up, and everything was English. I was good at math. So for me to learn this and do this from scratch, that was part of it, right? My weakness was I'm not exactly English and grammar are not my strengths. I'd never published a book. I'd never owned a publishing company. I had to figure it out. I'm a much better writer 10 years later than I was, back then. I learned to be better. I bettered myself. I knew what my weaknesses were. And understanding that, I think, is a big thing because those habits, most people kind of know what they are. But what I've noticed today is we've been ingrained to be a victim. So our bad habits aren't our fault, they're someone else's fault. And you got to get out of that mindset too. The only person limiting you in life today is you. We still live in the freest country. Yeah, it's
Say that
bonkers
again.
land right now. It's crazy as all can get out. But if you live the true life of, like me and you, I have a heck of a lot more freedom than anyone else. And I laugh if, Joe Biden's little henchmen are going to come up and knock on my door and tell me that, get vaccinated. That's going to be funny to me, but most people are panicking. They're all, oh my God. I go ahead, knock yourself out. You know what I mean? Because I don't worry about that stuff. I'm worrying about me getting things done, my life, what I need to do, being healthy. I'm healthy. You know, I worry about those things, the more important things. And I think people get wrapped around the axle again on victimhood. It's not my fault that I get up at noon, you know? Yeah, it is. It is your fault. I hate to break it to you. It's you. The fact that I don't get my stuff done every day. No, that's you again. You have an inability to organize and complete tasks. That's you. That's not me. That's not your neighbor. It's not your wife, husband. It's you. You're the problem. And once you get past that mindset, I've noticed when I do this, I'm known for this too, is tough love. I don't gloss over anything. I point out, if you don't want me to point out your problems, I'm not the guy for you. If you want me to rub you and tell you everything's okay and pat you on the back and say, Johnny, it's not your fault, you're special, go follow that other crap and do vision boards and all this crap that wastes time instead of getting things done. I'm the guy that says action is what life is about. Action is what makes you better. Action is what gets all these tasks that you don't get done. Plan, organize, execute. Plan, organize, execute. Over and over and over again. Amazingly, you get stuff done. It's pretty
So,
crazy. 3 things that you do will get all your tasks done.
so you said essentially being honest with yourself. And I found that that's been the most important thing for me as an entrepreneur over the last 11 years. And every time I hit a ceiling, it's because I'm not being honest with myself. And recently there was a new iteration of that, a new ceiling I put on myself, having a baby, working from the house, kind of messed up my routines and some of my extra study time and I think some of my extra focus time. And I blamed it on my circumstances and said, well, I need to get my extra sleep. And so recently I'm waking up 2 hours earlier and now my body's used to it. Now I'm just going to bed slightly earlier. And I've been way more productive. I've been way more mentally focused. And I realized I was being a victim to, well, I'm working from the house and it's harder now in the first couple years of having a baby. So I found my new ceiling where I was being a little bitch. I was being dishonest with
Yep.
myself. I was blaming it on something else. It was making me less productive. It was making me more stressed ultimately. And, so my point is, I found finding those ceilings within myself is the most important thing. And it's also the hardest. And so this ties into the next question I wrote down as you were talking, which is, I said the hard part of being solo or being an entrepreneur, or even if you still have your job, but you decide you're going to go out and build a side hustle of some sorts.
Yeah.
Well, I found that the hardest part is self motivation and lighting a fire under your ass. Um, Especially when you're doing it solo, when you're working in your room by yourself or an office by yourself and you don't have the back and forth of other people. Eventually, after 1 year, after 2 years, after 3 years, after 5 years, after 7 years, um, I found there's levels where it can be difficult to reorganize my productivity and my self motivation. And I was wondering if you could discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, and that's what most people think, is they think once they get to work from home, as people have learned during the pandemic, working from home is not as easy as they thought it was. There's a lot of distractions. And not only that, but it takes a lot of self-discipline.
Yeah, and that's what
You
I'd like
know,
you to talk about, that self-discipline.
yeah, because when you have a job, you have to show up at a certain time. You have to leave at a certain time. They give you your tasks. When you work for yourself, guess who does all that? You. You're the one who has to do that now. And that's why I always say if you have poor organizational skills, you lack self discipline, you will fail as an entrepreneur. You will 100% fail. You have to have those skills in order to be successful. Unless you somehow land in some sort of hot market that all you got to do is punch out some widget that everyone wants all at once. And guess what? That ends at some point too. Um, the self discipline is, and I tell people, you need to get up early. I get up right now. I'm getting up right around 5:30, 5:45. So for me, and people think I force. No, I wake up on my own. I have an alarm set for 6 just in case. That alarm hardly ever
So how
wakes
do
me.
you get that point? How do you get to that point of self-discipline?
You know, it's about again, come up with a plan, organize the plan, execute the plan. If you follow that, every task that you do, every major goal you have in life, if you do that, it will automatically give you the discipline because you have to follow it. You have to come up with a plan. And I've noticed that most people today lack planning skills. They
Hmm.
just wing it. They just go, I'm going to fly by the seat of my pants. Whatever happens, happens. Well, be ready for the results. And you know what happens? They're not ready for the results because it goes sideways on them. And then they panic. And then that panic turns into more panic. Then they make more bad decisions. Come up with a plan. And not only that, don't dig your heels in. One thing I have learned out of the government, things were very rigid. There was standard operating procedures. There was, we had books for everything. I had to know all these laws and codes, and it was ridiculous. What I learned as an entrepreneur is you got to be flexible. You need to be able to pivot when you need to pivot, and don't dig in. There's times when stuff isn't going to work and it's not working. You need to change it, and you need to change it quickly. So when your plan, you don't want to ironclad a plan and go, this is my plan. If it doesn't work, fine. No, it's like like the house. We had to make a bunch of changes this morning before I did this interview. A bunch of workers came out. We were changing on the fly because I didn't know until the structure was up exactly where certain things needed to go. It's part of it. Most people would have said, screw it, left it the way it is, and then they'll move in and go, this house isn't quite what I expected. Well, no kidding. you know, you went and you didn't change it as it evolved. And so as your business as an entrepreneur, as there's certain times that things won't work. They worked great for 6 months. Now they're not working. Why are they not working? Well, don't keep doubling down on the thing that's not working. You need to change it. You need to adapt it. So you need to be adaptable too. And as humans, we like the best way is we like systems and we like routines, good and bad. It's bad in the sense as an entrepreneur because that's going to actually put you out of business eventually. As an entrepreneur, you got to realize you're battling big companies. You're battling all these things that you don't have the resources for. So you need to be able to change and pivot as things change. And I think if you understand that and realize that your original business model that you come up with, the end of it is going to be far different than what you had in the beginning. I'm a perfect example. I had a health company. I was a paleo health company doing consulting, training athletes, doing all this. If someone would have said at that time, 10 years from now, you're going to be a self help author, I would have said, you're out of your friggin' mind. You don't know what you're talking about. But guess what? As things evolved, and as I went through my life and realized what I was teaching was life simplification in a bigger picture, in accordance to health, I would still be in the health world miserable because I wouldn't have pivoted. I wouldn't have changed to where the business was naturally going and what people were more interested in. People were more interested in my story and my advice on life than they were in health. They liked the health stuff, but they liked my journey even more. So I pivoted. I built the simple life to focus on the things people were interested in. Hope that made sense.
And you quit trading your time for money, right? Because if you were just only consulting 1v1 for health or
Yeah.
1v1 for somebody with diet issues or whatnot, you moved to a model that allowed you to service more people as well. And that's another thing that we aren't taught about. And a lot of times when we become a solopreneur, all we're really doing is moving from our old job per hour essentially to a new job. It's just that we're our own boss at the job, but we're still using a similar income earning model. So let's talk a little bit about that business scale, leverage, some of the important parts for you that have helped you, whether it be shifts in mindset or what have you, strategy that allowed you to open up your horizons to your higher financial potential that maybe you didn't see when you were just trading your time for money, working on fitness or whatever.
Yeah, and I didn't know when I started my business model in the beginning where it was going. No one
Ah,
does.
so
That's
you
the
have
thing
to
too.
be okay with not knowing.
You have to, because humans are very finicky creatures. You never know what they're thinking. And, everyone will tell you, oh, there's been all this analysis on human interactions and how they react to this, how they react to this color. I'll tell you right now, I have the strangest demographic in the self help world, period. I have a very interesting demographic. They're very well rounded. I have from 18, 17-year-olds to a 90-year-old lady who writes me emails, who follows me. I mean, it's fantastic though. That I didn't know that though. I had no idea that's where it was going. And that's what I mean. You have to be flexible because you don't know where this is going. And for me, if I would have dug in my heels, what I learned is that what I was doing had a financial cap, is a way to put it too.
Yes.
I could only go so far with that model. And once I realized that I had other things to offer that people were interested in, well, now that ceiling got raised a whole lot. Now I have all these other things that I can use to bring income in and service other people. And also what I realized, I guess I'm weird. I've always helped people in some sense, in the government, serving my country, in the military, doing law enforcement, and then being a college professor in between and consulting and teaching and writing books. What I realized is I'm in the podcast. My strength is teaching and helping people. Well, that should be the strength anyway for us. But instead, a consumer model, we're taught to push widgets, right? You just need to sell them something. That's pretty soul sucking in the end. And if you want to lose the desire and the kind of hunger for what you're doing, just sell widgets. It's going to burn you out and you're probably going to hate it. Not, it depends. But I teach people that you need to find something you're passionate about that helps people. You do that.
Otherwise, it's too
Yeah.
hard to motivate yourself
Yes.
in the later stages. It may not be in the first couple years, but I found the real soul searching And being an entrepreneur for me, because I dropped out when I was 18 and I wrote my first book about traveling when I was 19, self published that when I was 20. So 10 years now, I turned 30 tomorrow, actually. And it was really easy in the beginning, to be honest. It didn't work. It wasn't easy in terms of I didn't get the results right away, but I didn't care. I was enjoying myself. I was fired up. It was great. It was fun. It was new. It was fresh. The last few years of doing similar things for 10 years, it's been harder to. I've noticed more ceilings and more soul searching that I've had to do to continue to achieve higher levels of success. And so I'd love for you to talk about that because, like, right now, even if you're not achieving a whole bunch, you can still relate to this feeling where it's like, how do I get to the next level? Right now, we've got governments just stomping people's freedoms worldwide. We have a bunch of people that are just freaking afraid. They don't know what they're capable of. They've been programmed with crap their whole lives. No one around them achieved so much. They inherited crappy belief systems. We're told we're not as smart as Bill Gates and Oprah and all these billionaires. How do we bust through all that crap and find out what we're really capable of, especially right now?
Well, it's funny. I have a really good example, a story. I just went through burnout, but with Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey, I've met Oprah Winfrey. But um, I was on a protection detail of Nelson Mandela, and she showed up. But she seemed like a nice enough lady, but I'm not a big fan.
Oh, I'm not even saying it as criticism. It's just we think that these people that are billionaires, multimillionaires are so different, or they're just better at skills, or they inherited talent differently. And I believe if we can really be honest with ourselves and break away from the little childish, immature victim parts of ourselves, we're capable of so much. How do we get to that point of tapping into that? And that's the self motivation required for it.
Well, and you bring up a good point. It's that comparatitis, right? You look at billionaires, and I tell people you don't need to be a billionaire by any stretch. $1 billion is $1,000 million. What in the world are you going to do with that? First of all, I mean, that's ridiculous amounts of money. I always look at what do I need to live the lifestyle I want? And what am I willing to exchange? And there's a famous saying we used to say: behind every great fortune is a great crime. As investigators, and it tends to be true. I hate to be pessimistic. These people are wired differently in a sense. They're willing to do things that I'll just say the most moral people would not do to get there. I'll just leave it at that. So you have to decide if you want to cross that line again or not. Well, recently I burned out. I was frustrated with everything. I got pissed off. I saw a lot of statistics that came out of COVID of people who gained 35 pounds on average, 35 pounds. Now we're pushing 70, 80% overweight, obesity in this country. People are spending money, again, like drunken sailors. People are out acting like jackasses. And it threw me for a loop because my whole business is helping people to do better. And I'm all, what am I doing? Instead of getting worse, getting better, this is getting worse. And I kind of had a little bit of a mental breakdown on that because I went, hey, I only have so much time on this planet. Why do I give a shit at this point? I went through that. I went, why am I trying to help people who don't even want to be helped? And what happened was like you said, I got a bunch of emails back because I said, I'm contemplating packing it in. I have enough money. I can live the life I want. I won't be rich. I will live a good life. I'm fine. I can just disappear and do my own thing. I got a ton of emails back saying, hey, Gary, we get it. We want you. I wish you would continue. You've helped me. And I got a ton of really inspirational emails that snapped me out of my little bitchy funk. And I said, suck it up, Gary. Quit being a little baby. You know what? You're doing good work. You may not get the accolades that celebrities are getting and all this and how, you're the greatest thing. You got your $1 million Spotify deal, whatever, right? You may not ever achieve that, but you're making a huge impact on people's lives. That's pretty damn rewarding. So that's what I mean. If you can kind of snap yourself out of those things and realize that you're going to go through some tough spots as a solopreneur, entrepreneur, where you're going to lose, focus, and you're going to have a lot of self-doubt. And if you realize that up front, I think you'll be more successful in the end, because you just got to keep going. You may have to pivot, you may have to change some things, but just keep doing it. And one way to fail is to stop doing what you're doing. That's 100% failure rate too. Just stop what you're doing and quit. Well, you're going to fail, but you have a chance of success if you keep doing it and change and adapt. And yeah, realize too, you're in a country, you have worldwide people as well. I do as well. I have people who've bought my stuff all over the world, but we live in the US. So that's where I focus a lot of my information on, but it works everywhere. That in America, guess what? No matter how bad everything goes, you're still going to have a roof over your head. You're still going to be fed. You're still going to have access to some sort of medical care. You know what? You're going to be all right. Suck it up. People always go, well, I won't be able to afford my Lexus though. Who cares? Stop with that. Because what we've become kind of spoiled brats.
All we need is a zombie apocalypse for people to realize what's really important.
Yeah, or I always say we're just any time away from another asteroid strike. Where this thing starts over again. So why do you live your life that way? Why do you live your life worrying about social media? Why do you worry about buying that sports car that you technically really can't afford and don't need? Most Americans are in that boat. Why do you worry about that stuff? Focus on the things you can change and change them. Let the other stuff go away. Don't worry about it. I'm a avid reader, and I've been reading a lot of books that were written 80 to 100 years ago. Guess what they're talking about even in those books? The exact same thing we're going through right now. Politicians have been politicians, rich billionaires have been corrupt rich billionaires from the word go. This has all been going on for a long time. And guess what? It's going to continue to go on. Because for some reason, us human beings, we just love to torture each other for some reason. I don't know why, but we love to do it. Now, you can choose to be a part of that or not. And I choose not to be a part of that. But to understand that there's only so much you can change. So work on that stuff. Don't worry about, changing Washington, D.C. Good luck. I work there. If you want to worry about that all day, knock yourself out.
I'll tell you the best way we change Washington, D.C. So inflation gets out of control. In their government contracts, there's percentages for which they can only spend premiums on, and they have certain allocations. So what if inflation gets so out of control, they can't fund the government, and then they all realize that they're wasting their time, and then all of a sudden we get back to original America, small government. Gary, Gary, I really enjoyed our time today. We got to come to an end here, but for everyone listening, right there down below, we've got the link to the Simple Life series. We were discussing the Guide to Financial Freedom book. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure you hit the like button, give us a comment right there down below, and help out with the good old fashioned YouTube algorithm. Let us know one thing you learned from today's episode. I thought this one was a fantastic episode. So let us know what you think of it as well. We'll link all Gary's socials and all that fun stuff right there down below. Make sure you hit the bell notification to get notified for future videos. Gary, any last words?
Nope. Just go to thesimplelifenow.com, my website. You got it there. My podcast, The Simple Life with Gary Collins. It's doing well. It's one of the top self-help podcasts now. It's been growing, and everything's on the website. You can buy my books all over the place. Amazon, all bookstores, they're all over the place. But I'd really appreciate it if you support me and buy it from my website.
All right. Thank you for listening to today's episode. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon.